If you're a fan of underground rap, you've probably heard the name Lunchbox somewhere, or seen this guy get promoted on rap pages and heard of this new subgenre he's pioneering, and thought to yourself, what the actual is NewJazz? And why, as a rapper, would you name yourself after a food container? So in this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this Lunch Pail guy, what NewJazz is, his journey, my thoughts on him, and his music. Lunchbox is a 23-year-old rapper born and raised in East Harlem, and his upbringing was rough. When he was 13 or 14, he used to skate, and while skating, a friend gave him his name, Young Lunchbox. He hated it, and they all started laughing at him, but when he came back home, he was like, that was kind of hard, and ran with it. Apparently, his friend was watching some Japanese anime, which is super random. I would never guess that's how he named himself. In music, he originally gained some popularity as a producer for none other than Sheck Wes. He was Sheck Wes's main producer. I didn't even know. I just remember Sheck Wes had one huge song. Lunchbox actually produced most of the songs on Sheck Wes's debut album. He was kind of like Sheck Wes's Pure Born. Through Sheck, Travis Scott was actually listening to songs produced by Lunchbox and even listening to his beats. But at that time, he was only 18. Lunchbox had been making beats his whole life. He was 8 years old when he found out about Lil Wayne, 10 or 11 when he found out about Odd Future, and as a kid, he was really inspired by Chief Keef and Lil Wayne. His dad was a musician who played guitar in bands, and his mother was a singer who technically worked with Kanye. She was part of the choir that he sampled on Jesus Walks. So he came from a very, very musical family. Unfortunately, his father passed away when Lunch was only 13 years old. This would obviously be a tough moment for him, but all his musical equipment, as well as his computer, went to Lunch. He said, I'm gonna figure this out, and he did. He taught himself how to make beats. So he was making beats at a very young age, starting around 14, 15. He actually got his first placement as a producer from Sheck Wes at 15 years old. And he started taking his own rap seriously a couple years ago. And if you're wondering where this guy came from, it wasn't nowhere. Someone who helped Lunchbox early on was Yeet. He met Yeet through a Twitter group chat. Young Bands was in it, Nolan B. Rollin was in it, Captain Crunch was in it, Summers and Can were in it. So both new and old SoundCloud was in it. When Yeet moved to New York, they started linking up as homies. He remembers Yeet getting made fun of in group chats. When Yeet was first blowing up, Lunchbox sent him a song called Mode. Yeet said it was hard and hopped on it. That was actually the first song of Lunchbox's I heard. Once Yeet hopped on Mode, that's when people started catching on. Then, when Yeet came out to New York, he told Lunchbox to open for him, and he did. Since then, he's had more recognition, been played on OVO radio, etc. So I first heard Lunchbox through his song with Yeet, Mode. I listened to like 30 seconds and was like, okay, this is cool. It's kind of similar to Yeet though. If I'm being completely honest though, I only really listened to it because Yeet wasn't just handing out features. The only ones he gave out were ones that were in his close circle at the time. Anyways, some time passed by and all of a sudden I started hearing about this new phenomenon, this new genre, this mind-bending genre called NewJazz. I was like, alright, let me check it out. So what is NewJazz, right? Does it have to do with jazz? No, not at all. NewJazz is a subgenre of trap that consists of beats that have weird experimental melodies and wonky 808s. The genre has been popularized by Lunchbox and the producer Amir Prod, and since then more producers and artists have been hopping on that wave. It does feature some jazz instruments in the melodies, but it's not really anything like jazz. He just calls it NewJazz. At first, I thought it was just the producer Amir Prod smelling his own farts and just boosting his ego, because obviously I guess a lot of people would love to say they invented a genre, and honestly I still think that. According to them, it's reminiscent of a saxophone. The melodies are where they got that from. To me, it does not sound like a saxophone at all. Even the melodies, I started listening to some saxophone music on YouTube just to see if I was wrong, and it's not similar at all. But if you're really trying to find out why it's called that, it's because they don't really know what to call it. It's just a little different. So it's fair. However, it's not really like Plug or Plug and B where it's really different. It's just kind of different. And honestly, they haven't really done enough to carve out a subgenre yet, if you know what I mean. Lunchbox is really the only NewJazz artist, and there are a couple like Zodiac, but I wouldn't even call what he makes NewJazz because it's not what Lunchbox makes. They're just on Amir Prod beats. And there are NewJazz type beats, like my friend Ecstasy raps on them sometimes, but it's not really a genre yet. Maybe it will be. It's just the thing about NewJazz is that it's the same melody, the same type of drums, and you can just make it over and over again. There's just not much variety. Whereas something like Plug, even though it's as simple as it is, there is variety, and there definitely is with Plug and B. So don't get me wrong, it's not bad. I just wouldn't call it a genre. It's more of just Lunchbox and Amir Prod's sound. It's a smart move from a branding and marketing perspective because it's easier to build a community of fans if you're doing something different. But it's nothing crazy. So that's all I really have to say about NewJazz. It's honestly just Lunchbox, not a genre. So there are other things more interesting about Lunchbox other than NewJazz. One thing about Lunchbox is he's horrible at being a rapper. And I don't mean rapping, I mean all the other shallow stuff you gotta do, like flexing to be a rapper. He just wants no part in it.
Posting random fish and shit is cool. Flexing, all that shit cool. But like, at the end of the day, like, I'm trying to be the best rapper. Like, I don't care about flexing. Like,
so I'm gonna have to disagree with him there. Your image as a rapper is more important than your music these days, whether you want to admit it or not. Rappers like Ken Carson even get hate for the lengths they go to just portray a certain image. And you know, Ken Carson and Lunchbox, at this point Ken is a lot better, but even if they were at the same level, Ken would outperform Lunch like crazy just because of his image. No matter how corny you think Opium is with all black and everything. Ken is a bad example because of the Cardi cosign, but just look at any rapper, even Lunch's friend Yeet. It's not just the music, it was the way he dressed, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, his brand. And Lunchbox is severely lacking in that department. Hell, even look at Dom Corleo, he understands that. Hopefully Lunchbox learns too. Because being stubborn about trying to prove a point that your music will go up without promoting yourself properly is not going to do yourself any favors. So, word of advice from someone that has no idea what they're talking about: buy a pair of Ricks, get some designer, I don't know. Like, bro, what is this? I get that he's dressing how a lot of people from New York dress, but it's gonna hurt him. You still have to be yourself though, if that makes sense. I was just joking about the Rick Owens. He's just not good at putting himself out there on social media, which is a skill whether you want to admit it or not. So after listening to NewJazz, his newest album, I thought it was alright. It wasn't insane or anything, it was just nice. And I started listening to more of his music. I remember checking out his album Nightfall a year ago. My favorite songs were Jokes Up, 50, and they were really catchy, and I liked his flow, it was cool. I really got put onto him from his collab with Retta, who I didn't know was like his little bro at the time. He dropped a song called So Fun, which I enjoyed a lot as well. And most recently, he dropped NewJazz, which I'm guessing he only named NewJazz because he was really confident that he would be able to flesh out the album. And the album itself is alright. There aren't any horrible songs. It's really hard to get through this album because it's like a 20-song album where all the songs are very similar because of the beats and flows. I'm not saying they all sound the same or all the flows are the same, but it falls short in its replay value. Another thing about the album is what's next. You can't just keep saying NewJazz and dropping the same type of music. It wasn't that much better than Nightfall, which was a good album. The real issue with the album is it's almost entirely produced by one producer and the beats get really repetitive. A good way to think about it is, think of it like if Yeet made Sorry About That, instead of progressing, he just kept making music on those exact same beats and called it some new genre. I mean, Yeet did it a couple of times, but he had a lot of variety, and I'm kind of sick of Lunchbox rapping on the same thing over and over again. I want to hear something new. Overall, my thoughts on Lunchbox are that he's a cool rapper. He just doesn't have a proper image. NewJazz is kind of BS. It's just not a genre. Where do I see him going in a couple years? I can't really say that because he doesn't put himself out there on social media like that, and I don't really see him getting huge without upgrading his image. So I'm gonna give him a 5 out of 10. See you next time.